Thanks everybody for coming. I know that this is kind of a crazy time that we're all in. I'm just so happy that everybody is here and is interested in this topic. We are going to be talking today about digital accessibility, best practices for creating user-friendly presentations, documents, and other content. So the things that you learn in this presentation will kind of prepare you to create digital content of all kinds and just to be thinking of the concepts behind accessibility. Many of the things you'll learn will be applicable in many of the different programs that you use. So I'm going to let Caroline talk for just a little bit about Citizen Science Month, so take it away.
Yes, and just so everyone knows, we are recording this webinar. And if Facebook Live cooperates, it hopefully will stream on Facebook too, but if not, we still have the recording. And we'll be emailing this webinar and additional materials early next week. So I'm Caroline Nickerson. I'm from the SciStarter team, and I'm so grateful to be presenting with Kelly Ham today and to be learning from her about digital accessibility. I met Kelly through working on Citizen Science Day last year in 2019, which engaged libraries and all sorts of different institutions and people all over the world to do citizen science. And we said, hey, and we got a lot of feedback that said, you know, we want a whole month. A day's not enough. Let's do a month. And we said, okay. So then with support from the National Library of Medicine, Arizona State University's School for the Future of Innovation and Society, Science Friday, National Geographic, and the Citizen Science Association, SciStarter was able to work to put on Citizen Science Month in April 2020. And the reason this all happens is because of great people like you who organize events to celebrate citizen science and efforts to get people doing citizen science. So just in case you don't know, citizen science is public engagement and real research. So that's basically any way a member of the public can be meaningfully involved in the scientific process, create new knowledge, and move us forward. That can be everything through annotating blood vessels in an online game for Alzheimer's research scientists and thus speeding up the search for a cure, to taking pictures from your window of a bird you see and uploading it to iNaturalist. And with Citizen Science Month, in light of public health concerns, we want to keep people safe. So we are moving everything possible online. So we are not promoting any in-person events anymore. We are encouraging people to follow public health guidelines, listen to advice from the CDC and other relevant local authorities. And we're also encouraging online projects and online events, much like this one. So there are so many different citizen science projects that you can do from your home, like stall catchers. I mentioned that Alzheimer's research project. And there's some, and you'll see some of those in my next slides, but I just really value these types of events because they encourage online connection, especially in these turbulent times. And I know I'm socially distancing by myself. I'm self-quarantining in Washington, D.C. So these events make me still feel connected to a wider community and feel part of something bigger than myself. So Kelly, if you'll get me to the next slide. So these are the partners I mentioned: the Citizen Science Association, Arizona State School for the Future of Innovation and Society, the National Library of Medicine and the All of Us Research Program, Science Friday, National Geographic, and of course I'm from SciStarter. And we're so grateful. I know some of you may be on the line from the National Library of Medicine or from NNLM. We're so grateful for your continued support and hard work to make all this happen, and just passion for citizen science. So we'll go to the next slide. So as you can see, we've pivoted many of our materials in light of this new virtual events focus for Citizen Science Month. A funny story about this graphic, and it just shows how no one's perfect, and this is kind of an evolving process for all of us. I was making this to get ready for our online move, and with this model, I accidentally used a picture at first of him touching his face. I said, oh wait, that doesn't follow the public health guidelines I've received. So then I switched it to this picture of him holding a coffee cup. But as you can see, he's presumably socially distancing. He's at home, he's on his computer, and let's pretend he's playing stall catchers and doing Alzheimer's research. So that's just an example of how we've moved things online. And with this event, we're giving you the tools to make your online materials accessible to your communities. So we hope that the advice we give here is helpful. So we'll go to the next slide. So these are our featured projects from the National Library of Medicine. They helped us select these. And they picked them specifically because they wanted projects that people could do virtually from anywhere and where they could contribute data online. So Globe at Night, that's a light pollution project. You could presumably do that from your, your window of your apartment. You could take pictures and observations of the night sky to study light pollution. Flew Near You, that's a project out of Harvard. You just fill out a survey every week about whether or not you're feeling healthy or sick. And the epidemiologists there use that data to predict outbreaks of the flu. Debris tracker, if you're able to go on a walk, if public health guidelines where you are allow that type of exercise, you could look for litter or marine debris and submit sightings of it with that app. I See Change, you document weather and climate change. So you use your own local expertise to say, oh, it's raining outside. It usually doesn't rain this heavily in Southern California. That's an observation you can make for I See Change. Stall catchers, I love it. I always talk about it. One of my favorite projects. And they actually have a lot of Sci Month activities going on with stall catchers. So definitely check those out. But with stall catchers, all from your computer or your smartphone or your tablet, you can classify and make annotations of blood vessels and speed up the search for a cure to Alzheimer's. And they gamified it to make it fun. And Crowd the Tap, that's another one you can do from home. And it's actually being promoted on Science Friday today. Crowd the Tap, you just use a penny and a magnet, and you're able to test your pipes to see if they contain lead and help create a national inventory of tap water pipes. So these are all projects that you could urge your community to do and potentially organize online events around. One example is I know a lot of libraries are doing online citizen science story time. So they're kind of crafting a little narrative that people can dial into and listen to with their families perhaps, and then they're leading people through the project. I know my boss, Darlene, for example, these projects that you see here, the National Library of Medicine featured projects, those are also in her book, The Field Guide to Citizen Science. So she's been calling into virtual book clubs all around the country and kind of doing that description to action component as well. So we'll go to the next slide. These are, if you go to citizensciencemonth.org, you will see things like our Sci Month event calendar. We have all these different days to encourage people to engage from home, and that we hope that you plan events around and add to SciStarter. So one example is World Sourdough Day. Educators, Nat Geo educators, recorded videos about the Sourdough for Science project and how you can do chemistry with kitchen materials and with sourdough. And they uploaded those to SciStarter, and we helped get the word out about that. So that's just one example of a theme day. So we'll go to the next slide. And it is poll time, the moment you've all been waiting for. So I'm going to launch a poll, and I want to know what best describes you. Are you familiar with SciStarter and Sci Month? Are you not familiar? Are you very familiar? Do you already have a SciStarter account, for example? I think that would count as very familiar. And it looks like we have 37 people in here, and the vast majority, 70%, say they are not familiar with SciStarter and Sci Month. Well, you just heard my slides, so I hope you're a little bit more familiar now. SciStarter is the connector of citizen scientists to projects and events that need their help to do research. Someone said, I'm familiar with Sci Month, but not SciStarter. That's really good to know. It's really important. This helps us know who we're reaching and how we're getting the word out about these ways to contribute to scientific research and turn your curiosity into impact. We'll give it about 10 more seconds for people to vote. Wow, 11%. I'm going to end the poll now, actually. I think I'm not seeing any more votes come in. Last second chance. Okay, we got one more vote. I'm just going to go ahead and end it. And I'm going to share my results. So 71% said they're not familiar with SciStarter and Sci Month. Well, I hope my preamble made you a little bit more familiar. Oh, someone raised their hands. Let's see. Nope, I guess they took their hand down. No worries. If you have anything else, please put it in the chat. We'll be monitoring it. Oh, Alexandra said, love stall catchers. Yes, Alexandra and I have done stall catchers through a virtual event together before. Fun fact. All right, well, let's go to our next slide. I'll hand it over to Kelly.
Okay, thank you so much. That was great. And as we go through, I'll be making references every so often to SciStarter and to Citizen Science Month, but do reach out to us. You'll have our contact information at the end. Feel free to reach out to us at any time for information about any of the topics we covered today. So Our objectives today is that by the time we finish the webinar, you should be able to really have a good understanding and be able to describe what the common issues are with electronic content, and also perform really simple techniques. You'll have kind of a toolkit that you can use whenever you're creating PowerPoint slides or Google Slides, Word documents, or even if you happen to be doing any kind of web development. A lot of these concepts will translate across. And it's just good to have that in as part of a full mindset. So I really am hoping that by the end of the time today, you'll kind of be thinking differently about your mindset when you create materials, and have that accessible design in mind, and then build your workflow around that. If we can help you do that, then we've accomplished something really good today. So accessibility for digital content is very important. I do want to say just a word about physical accessibility too. Whenever we're in our organizations or thinking about our physical spaces, accessibility is very, very important. And we know that we won't be talking so much about physical accessibility today. This is really just about the digital side of things, but they're both equally important. And you know, as we're doing our citizen science events or any kind of programming in our libraries or our institutions, in our museums, or any of wherever you happen to be working, it's really good to be thinking of the two and how they go hand in hand, because we want to make sure that we can bring people into our spaces, but we also want to make sure that the content we create is equally accessible. And one final word about design. There is a concept of universal design, and that is designing whatever it is you're doing, your spaces, your content, so that it's user-friendly to everybody. And as it turns out, that many of these techniques you'll learn today make the content better for everybody. So it's not just that we are trying to make our content so that a person with a disability can use it. It actually makes it better for everybody. And so that's part of that mindset. Let's be thinking about how the things that we do, if we just are intentional about the way that we create and design, we can make the world a better place for everybody. It's not something that we're doing just because we have to. So what we'll talk about today, there are 5 main things, and it's actually more than 5, but that 5 is a nice, good number, and I've fit a few things into some of these bullet points. But we're going to learn the importance of using the built-in layouts. I think that in many cases we use just the standard, you know, the tools that we've learned quick and easy ways to do things. But there are better ways, and one of those ways is using the built-in tools and layouts in these programs. You'll also learn about applying good alt text. I'm sure many of you have already heard about the importance of writing a descriptive text that goes along with an image. And we'll be talking about that, but also what is good alt text. We'll talk about hyperlinks. Sometimes if you just think in your mind about a YouTube video and the link that goes along with that, it's long, it's nonsensical. Even if you use a URL shortener, it still doesn't tell you where that document resides. So we'll talk about how to create better hyperlinks. And then using color. There are a couple of things you need to know to make color and the use of color more accessible. And then there are many common mistakes that people use that will actually generate errors or difficulties when people are accessing your content. And so a common thing, probably one of the most common things that is a very big error is using text boxes in PowerPoint or Word when you actually draw the text box and enter your text in. That is a technique that's very common, but it makes that content completely inaccessible to a screen reader. So if a person with a visual disability is looking at your PowerPoint and there are text boxes there, it's as if it doesn't even exist in your content. And so there are a few other common mistakes, and so we'll go over those as we go along. And I do want to say, I'm going to be just showing slides for the first part of the presentation. After I get through all of my slides, I'm going to go live into PowerPoint and show a demonstration of how to do these things. So I'll go pretty quickly through these next slides, and then I'll show the actual demonstration of how to do it. And that, I think, will help you. If you have questions as we go along, throw them in the chat box. We'll have a time where we can stop and I can answer anything after we go through the 5+ topics that are here. So the reality is that sometimes you can tell by looking that a person has some sort of a disability. Other times you can't tell. You can't tell by looking. And it's very likely, I didn't include any statistics here, but suffice it to say that there are so many either obvious or unobvious disabilities that people have throughout our, in our work life, the colleagues we work with, the people we meet on the street, the people who come into our institutions to use our services, and across the world in general. So some common ones here that we'll be kind of dealing with today are low vision and blindness, hearing loss, deafness, the physical or mobility issues. We won't be talking as much about that, but if any of you have ever had maybe a broken wrist or a hand in a cast, or if you have arthritis or know somebody that does, that's a type of mobility issue that makes it very difficult for someone to use a computer. And so if your navigation is better, if you build your content, if there's any interactivity so that it's easier to access, then that will go a long way towards making that kind of thing accessible too. And then there are other kinds of neurological or cognitive disabilities or issues that people might experience. And again, we can design our content to help people with a variety of issues in that area to be able to understand and use our content better. So I want to talk just for a moment about some types of assistive technologies. There are many others, but for our purposes today, for users with visual impairments, there are tools such as screen readers, and there are several software tools. One is called JAWS. That's a very common and powerful screen reader, but there are other ones too, like NVDA, and even some operating systems have screen readers or text-to-voice tools built in. I know my phone has accessibility features. The Apple iOS has very good tools. There is also voice recognition software, so for people who need to dictate. And you'll see a great example of this later when I do a demonstration of Google Slides and their captioning feature. So that uses a voice recognition software and Google Translate to do some pretty amazing stuff. Another type of technology would be just simple things like enlarging text or displays on your computer screen. That's an assistive technology. And then audio descriptions of movies. If any of you have ever, well, you may not have had experience with this, but imagine that you weren't able to see a movie and there was a lot of action going on, but no dialogue. If you couldn't see the screen, you would maybe hear, let's say that it was a burglar, walking around a house and hiding in the shrubs and looking in the window. They're not saying anything, so there's no sound to hear what's happening. But an audio description would actually be describing move by move that burglar is creeping around behind the bush and looking in the window. So that is a way that brings that content alive for somebody who can't actually see the movie. And then with, the same thing would be true with video. Maybe there would be an audio, a transcript of the dialogue or whatever. And then for users with hearing impairments, closed captioning for video, which would show the text that's being spoken, and it would be in real time. Typically, that is the required way rather than having a transcript that isn't synced up in real time. And that works with, you know, video, television, or other kinds of digital media. So the bottom line here is that if you have good design, it'll work with those assistive technologies, and that's how you get, bringing those two things together is where you get the accessible content. So with PowerPoint, I'm starting with PowerPoint because it's a great way to demonstrate and describe many of these tools and techniques that create, you know, accessible content. And then that can be applied to the other programs that you use. And PowerPoint is wonderful. When it first came out, everybody was amazed, and everyone was very excited to use all kinds of colorful templates and animations and all of these flashing displays, and it was pretty overwhelming, actually. So and then it was so easy to use that immediately people just developed work habits with PowerPoint that before people were really thinking about building accessibility into it. And now those habits are very, you know, stuck in our heads and hands. But it ends up that as beautiful it is to look at, it can be completely inaccessible. And that's where we need to really do some work. So the first tip that I want to, or the first, well, it's not a tip, this is something that I hope everybody adopts. Be aware of the built-in layouts and also using the outline view in PowerPoint. These two things alone will make your slides much more accessible if you don't do anything else. But of course, there are other things I'd like you to do. But PowerPoint come with every template will have built-in layouts. As you can see in the image on the screen, we have your common ones. You always have a title slide, and then you have ones with a title and content. You've probably seen these because as soon as you open up PowerPoint, you will always see one on the slide portion of your screen. Excuse me. And so the reason we do this is that screen readers rely on the structure and order. And this is true for PowerPoint, for websites, for Word documents, for everything. So the screen reader will be able to identify what the title is. It will also identify if there's an image. It will know if it's a paragraph, or in Word, as an example, it will know if it's a heading 1 or heading 2, as long as the person who created it applies the structure. And so as you're looking at these layouts, you'll see the title section, which is required on every slide. And then the content section is where you can insert your text or your pictures, your graphs, your tables, whatever it is that you have, your video, your links, but they need to go within that container. So think of it as a container for your content. And if it's there, then the screen reader will go look in that container and be able to tell the user what's in there. If you put it outside the container, it is not going to see it, or it won't see it very well. So these elements, I mean, they provide these layouts, but they are very customizable. You can click on one and move it around, resize it. You can do all kinds of things with these layouts. So you're not stuck with what it appears. You can just make it look the way you want. That means you can create really beautiful content that's accessible too. So the layouts are very important. Another thing you can do, I mentioned the outline view. So here's a screenshot that shows a slide, and it's one of the slides we already looked at. But if you click on, if you're in PowerPoint, you can click on the View tab, and then it'll bring up over on the left, you'll see the normal view or the outline view. And in this case, I've clicked on outline view. The key point here is that every bit of text that's on your slide should also be showing up in your outline view. And if it doesn't, then that means that you've either created a text box or there's an image in there that has text on it. But the screen reader, it's kind of just a double check. If you can see it in the outline view, then the screen reader will be able to read it out loud to the user. And you notice that the titles on the left-hand side are in bold, and then the regular content is not bold. And you can even see the indentations and the bullet points if there are bullet points. So this is the way that you can identify if what you put on your slide is actually going to be readable by the screen reader. It also is a visual way to see if you've accidentally added a bunch of extra spaces or returns after your content. If you have 5 or 10 returns, that will actually be flagged by the screen reader. It'll say that there's a big space there, and then it's confusing. So you can delete out, you can clean up your PowerPoint this way. So another thing about using the structure, and this is very important, which I'll try to explain later. If we have more time at the end, I'll actually be demonstrating how this can save you a lot of time in the end. What you want to do when you're putting in your content, now in this box on the right, this would be if you were creating your slide, you would either be adding text in here, or if you have a picture, table, or whatever, the best way to do it is to insert your picture using that icon. And the reason is that this creates the structure. It puts that picture in the container, like I was describing earlier, and it puts it in the right order, which is another aspect that we'll cover a little bit later. And the way that you do this is the best practice. When you're beginning to create a presentation, create a folder on your hard drive, and then as you're going through and you're finding the pictures or the images that you want to use, save a copy of those in that folder. And that way you have everything, you know, it's also a good planning tool and part of your workflow. It helps you just plan and design and make something that looks really good, but you don't want to be copying and pasting, and talk about that too. So you basically create your folder, save your images, and then you insert the images using the pictures icon in that content box. So this was a picture that I had, and so I just saved it in my folder, and then you can make your slide look good. Now we're moving on to number 2. You notice that I'm a kind of a bug person. I love looking at bugs and taking pictures of bugs. So that spider picture was one of mine, and this is a praying mantis, and my cat saw it and was hassling it, and all of a sudden it put its wings up and it charged my cat. So this was it happened so quickly. I was lucky enough to get this photograph. And I'd never seen anything like it before. And then as soon as it did that, it folded its wings, it flew away and then folded its wings back down. So it's the only time I've ever seen it in all of my years of bug watching. So now if I were going to describe this image, imagine that you weren't able to see this slide. You were using a screen reader, or for some other reason you weren't able to see it. So the images and how you describe them really help tell your story. So there would be a couple of ways that you could describe this. You could say what it is. It's a praying mantis. But there's a lot more to this picture than that. And so, and actually what the praying mantis is doing here is a special type of a display that is often used. Sometimes it's used during mating, but usually it's used either as an aggressive move to make themselves look bigger. And in this case, it really worked because my cat was backing up, and my cat was a 20-pound cat. So it really works. At any rate, it's a great example for how you would describe the alt text here. So in this case, I decided to describe this. The term is deimatic display, or I might be pronouncing it wrong. It might be deimatic. It's DEIMATIC display. And so I wrote in the alt text for this that it was a praying mantis showing a dematic display as a sign of aggression or something like that. We'll look at it a little bit later and we'll see how I decided to describe it. The key point here is that you want to have an equivalent experience for the person who's looking at it. If I just said praying mantis, that would give the idea of what it was, but it really wouldn't convey the same experience as if you were able to see it with your eyes. And that's an important factor. I have seen some advice for institutions where, show all of your imagery when you're presenting live, but strip out your images to make it easier for accessibility. Well, in my opinion, that actually doesn't hold, it doesn't go with the spirit of making something an equivalent experience. So my advice would be just learn the tools, build it into your workflow, add your alt text, and it will make it a really wonderful experience for everybody. So the art of writing alt text is not too much, not too little. You want to be just like, the three little bears, and you want the one that's right in the middle. So the way that you do it is to right click on the image. You can choose, as you do this, and we'll demonstrate this a little bit later, you right click on the image, you choose the one that says size and position, and in that you will have an alt text. It may be different, whatever program you're using. If you're using PowerPoint on a Mac, it might be different than my PowerPoint on my PC. If you're using Microsoft Office 365, I know that just recently there have been some new accessibility features that have been added to 365. So it probably will be different, but it'll be easy to find. So when you see the description field, you can put your text in that field, explain the meaning of it, not just that it's a praying mantis. You want to limit repetition and also saying things like picture of or a photo of. And if you have a logo that repeats on many of your pages, you can describe your logo first, and then you don't have to describe it every time it shows up. And there's a way that you can have the screen readers skip over repetitive images. The way that you do that is in the description field. You would enter a double quotes, so it's quote, quote, and that causes the screen reader to skip over that particular element. You could also do that if you have say a decorative border or some sort of a flourish image that doesn't really convey any meaning. So that's how you can have the screen reader skip that. So the other thing you want to watch out for is sometimes when you insert your image, it will automatically put something in the description field, and it'll be the file name. And so as an example, whenever my camera takes a picture, it gives it a date, and or from some other program. And so sometimes if you do the accessibility check, it will pass the check because it has alt text in there, and it doesn't. The accessibility checker doesn't read the text. It can't interpret what it says. It just knows that if there's something in there, then you're good to go. So that's up to you to check and make sure that the text that's in there is actually meaningful. You don't want your file name in there. Now moving on to the hyperlinks. This is pretty simple. There are some additional things that we won't cover today, but this will just give you an idea and get you started. So if I have a PowerPoint slide and I put the YouTube URL under this is actually, and I want to just point this out as long as I use this as my example, this YouTube playlist from SciStarter, the how-to videos for citizen scientists, for any of you on the call who said that you weren't very familiar with citizen science, you've got to go look at these videos. They're short, they're wonderful. They will get you so excited and just give you a really good idea of what all of the possibilities are. And it's a good introduction to SciStarter too, because that's a way you can find the the projects that you'd be interested in, or for certain age groups or whatever topic you might be interested in. So anyway, this hyperlink is very unclear, and you wouldn't want anyone watching your presentation to, you could just see them. They would start to write it out, and it's just a losing proposition. So here's a better way. So it's the same slide, but what I did was I actually cheated, and I just copied this off the SciStarter website. They had the how-to videos for citizen science. Embedded within that link is the actual hyperlink. So if somebody is looking at this presentation on their computer, or later when you download it and look at it again and share it with all of your colleagues, that hyperlink is embedded behind the meaningful text. So that's how you would make a meaningful hyperlink. Now, one of the other tenets of good accessibility and design is using your color properly. There are many ways that people use color that really, make it hard to either read or understand. So you notice in the header here, I have good contrast is essential for readability. Black on white, of course, that's the best contrast that you can get. But then if you have a light background and then a light text, it's just going to wash out. So the gray or yellow on white, you can just see that it's much, much harder to read. And so the opposite is true. We have the red bar at the top and the white text, and that has really good contrast too. But how do you know? Now there are some guidelines. There are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which you might have heard of, WCAG they call it, and then also Section 508 of the ADA. That's an actual law for electronic accessibility. Both of those talk about the ratio, the contrast ratios. But there are tools, lots of tools on the web that will help you know if your contrast is good. And there is a website I really, really like. They have lots of tools and a lot of information about accessibility in general, but from WebAIM. And they help web developers, but it's also good for people who are creating content in PowerPoint or other kinds of resources. So this contrast checker, you can just click on the colored box where it says foreground color and choose the color you're interested in. Or if you happen to have the code like they have there, you can type in that code, but it's pretty easy just to use. And then you can check your foreground color, which might be your font, and then the background color, which would be the background. And it will tell you, what if it passes the accessibility guidelines or if it fails. Now, another thing about color. So color blindness is a real thing. There are, and it turns out that I think the statistics are that men happen to have more color blindness in general than women, but red and green and there are many kinds of color blindness issues. But here's an example of how you would not want to use color. So in this case, it says the required questions are marked in red. Okay, let's say that for my eyes, this all looks black, because if I weren't able to see the red, then I wouldn't be able to tell that name, email, and company were the ones that were designated as red. So if you're using color as a way to convey meaning, you also have to use some other mechanism of conveying that meaning. So it might also be marked in red and then with an asterisk, and you would identify that, and then you would put the asterisk, which is a common convention anyway. You would put that next to name, email, and company so that there would be a second way of identifying it. So that's just an example of how color sometimes is used to convey meaning incorrectly. So now getting into the last thing, I'm going to talk about some of the bad habits that have just been so easy to do because PowerPoint, Word, all of these other tools that we use, make it very easy to do bad things. It's not that they're bad, it's just that it means that people who are using screen readers or other kinds of assistive technologies may not be able to get all of our content. And the first and foremost one is stop using text boxes. So if you have a PowerPoint slide and you want to make it look good, it's so easy to just go insert text box, you draw the shape and size you want right where you want it, you type in your text, and just as you're doing that, if you catch yourself doing it, just think, okay, this information is now going to be invisible, you know. So and then go back and find your structured layout and use that and resize that and move it where you want it and make that your text box, and then it will be completely accessible. So the next thing to do, which we already talked about, is to copy and paste your images. So when you're inside that structured layout or that container, then you will, instead of copying and pasting, you're going to insert your image. And what this does is that it actually gives you a reading order warning. The other thing that you want to stop doing if you're doing it is using animations with flashing or flickering. So it's basically those are the things that I wanted to cover. So Carolyn, do we have any questions that have come in?
Yeah, there's been a vibrant conversation going on.
Awesome.
Yes. One thing Katie said from Woodland Park Zoo, that she loved your bug photo, which I loved as well.
I have a lot more.
Yes. Okay.
Great.
So Tanny asked, you mentioned that text boxes don't work, but aren't the content boxes displayed here text boxes?
They are text boxes in a sense, but they're a special type of text box. And when those are used, then I'm not sure of the technical way to describe it, but it's as if there's some background code that is embedded into the document. And so if you use those structured layouts, then a screen reader is built to look for those structures that are already embedded into the document. So a text box by itself is almost like a decorative element. And so if you're using those, then the screen reader can't see it. And so that's where you would want, even though they look identical, and when I show you the examples, when we go live here in a few minutes, you're able to take anything that you've created with text boxes, and you can actually make it look identical. I did that with some of those earlier slides from SciStarter, because some of those were made with text boxes, but I just recreated them. But the key thing is that you can remediate your slides. That's what they call it when you fix your slides that have been created that are not accessible. You can fix them, but it's so much better to just create a good, accessible product from the beginning rather than to remediate. So create, don't remediate. It takes a lot longer to create something and then have to go back and fix it all. It's just better to spend a little bit of extra time, do it accessible from the get-go.
Awesome. And then someone else, Marquita asked, how is this done when using Google Slides instead of PowerPoint? And
yeah, so you're going to get an answer to that. So in just a minute, I'm going to show you how we do that.
Yeah, I know we're running. Want to spoil it. It's like spoiler alert.
Yeah. So, were there any other questions for right now?
Yes, someone asked, do I have to use the content box? Can I insert a photo from the insert tab?
You know, I think it should work. However, well, what I do know is that if you use the insert tab, it used to generate the reading order warning, which still means that it's still accessible, but it makes you do an extra step later. If you are checking for accessibility, then you have to do an extra step later. So if you use the insert through the content box, you're not given a warning at the end when you check your accessibility. That may have changed with the 365 product. I haven't been able to investigate that with somebody who uses a screen reader. So, so I can't answer that 100%.
Then Nikki asked, is there a screen reader that we could download onto our computer to be able to check our own presentations before they're presented?
There are some. I know that the NVDA screen reader is available for download, and there will be a handout that we'll be publishing next week. So I'll make a note to have some information about what you can do for screen readers.
And then
Thanks
we
for
have
asking.
one more question for this Q&A section. Megan asked, where do you stand on putting a shadow on text?
It isn't a technical accessibility issue. It might be a usability issue for some users. I think it just depends on your audience and what you're trying to accomplish. I think that you know, for usability and readability, just clean sans serif font is usually the best with good contrast. But you know, it really depends. I'm not 100% against it, but I tend to not use it myself for digital content that's going to be made available to a wide audience. So that it's kind of, you know, you can go on a case-by-case basis and see what works for your audience.
All right, Kelly, I think we're done with Q&A.
Okay, now I know we're running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to do just a little bit of demonstrating in PowerPoint, and then we're going to go to Google Slides. Whoops, I think I accidentally just stopped sharing my screen. Let me share it again. Didn't mean to do that, sorry. Okay, are you able to see my PowerPoint?
We can.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is just go over a few of the things. When you're in your PowerPoint, see if I can make my screen a little bit larger here. Oh, it doesn't actually allow me to do that, but you know, you've got your bars across the top and your tabs. So when I go into if I wanted to create a new slide, I'm gonna go to the end of my presentation here. Go to a new slide, then here is where I have my content boxes. If I want to insert a picture, I can go here. I could also go to insert up here, and then I can do pictures, online pictures. It's the same function, so I'd encourage you to do this. Click here, and then you find whatever picture it is you're looking for, and then you know, go from there. At that point, once you insert your image, and I'm just going to go to another slide here. If I want to do my alt text, I've got this picture now. I'm going to right click it, and under size and position, it brings up on the right hand side over here, I have alt text. Now I've already been using alt text, so it was already expanded. But then this is where I would just put in the word thanks, which it's not in here on this particular one. So this would be it would come up as an error when I do my accessibility check. So now that one has alt text. To do an accessibility check, and I should say on the slides, there are additional slides that we're not going to be able to cover. I figure it's better right now to, instead of going through the slides, I'm just showing you these live features, and you'll be able to see it on the slides. So I have clicked on let me go back. So if I click on File, and then check for issues, there is a option for check accessibility. And when you click that, you will see an accessibility checker pop up. I'm going to close out my format there so you can see it better. So the accessibility checker now will tell me what slides I have that are missing slide titles. It will tell me if I'm missing any alt text. And right now I had pulled in some slides from Google Slides, so it's showing some things from Google, but it's also showing some content placeholders. Here's an example. So when I click on this missing alt text, it's the image that I have from SciStarter. I click on that, then I right click, And that's when I can add my alt text for that. So that's just a very quick example of how you use your accessibility checker that's built into PowerPoint. And then it will also tell you, when I mentioned the check reading order, the order is very important for screen readers. It needs to know what the title is, what the content is, what your pictures are in the order that you intend. So whenever you copy and paste a picture in, it's going to give you this check reading order. And the way that you need to check is, let me find, I want to show you, okay, so this slide has a title and it has 6 images in it, which is kind of a lot. So when I first saw this slide, the order was kind of all messed up because the things had been put in a certain order and then moved around. So the way that you check the reading order, I'm going to tab through. So right now I've clicked on the slide and I click tab and it highlights the title. I don't know if you can see that, but it tells me that the title is the first thing that the screen reader would read. And then it now is clicking forward and it has landed on the Citizen Science Association. So I'm going to tab through and it shows me exactly the order that the screen reader would read these. And each one of these has its own alt text. So that's an example with that. Now I'm in view of the time that we have, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And then I'm going to share my screen again and take you to Google Slides. So I want to show you a couple of features in Google Slides. Now, all of the things that I just mentioned, so this is the exact same presentation. I went to Google Slides and I uploaded the PowerPoint into Google Slides, and I could actually create new slides using that and just add to this if I wanted. But all of the same tools are here. If I want to add a new slide, I can click on slide and put new slide. I can apply a layout, and this should look really familiar to you because we've got if I wanted a new section, if I wanted a title and content or 2 types of content, it's the same basic concept. And then if you want to add alt text, let me go to one of these that has images. So let's say that this image, I want to see what the alt text is. I can right click, and right here is the alt text button. It's easier than in PowerPoint. And then here I just have Citizen Science Association in the description, click OK, and we're good to go. So I'm curious now to see what we had for the alt text for the praying mantis. So I right click, alt text, and it says, example of a dymatic display by a praying mantis, its wings are fanned out in dramatic fashion. So that's what I had chosen for the praying mantis alt text. And now I want to show you the most amazing thing. I just learned this a few days ago, so I am so jazzed about this. If I'm in Chrome, and it's really important, you have to be in Chrome and you have to be in presenter mode. But when I click on presenter mode, and I have my headphone plugged in, if I have a microphone plugged in, you notice as I just move my mouse around, this bar comes up at the bottom with some options. And now I have this function, or this technique or tool. It's a closed caption tool. I'm going to click it and watch what happens on the bottom of your screen. This is a real-time captioning function, and it's working through Google Translate. I have not seen this used very often. I saw it on a presentation that was done by Caroline and the people at Science Friday a week or so ago, and it just blew me away. So I'm so excited about this. But again, you have to be using Chrome and you have to be using Google Slides in presenter mode. And I can also change the position of it. If I click on that drop down arrow, I can change the caption so that it shows up at the top, or I can change the text size to small, medium, large, or extra large. This is the large size, which might be kind of distracting to some people, but it also might be useful if you have an audience that is an older set with with poor vision, or you would know your audience better. but I think that for most people, the small size would be pretty good. So I think I'm going to stop there. I know we just have a few minutes left, but I think that if I stop sharing my slides now.
And then Kelly, a few more questions came through for you before I end with our rousing call to action. Someone asked, regarding alt text, it seems to let us put a title in as well as a description. When would we use the title section, if ever?
There are times if you have a complicated slide, you could put in the title just kind of the overview, just a phrase of what that is, and then have more description in the description section. I've talked with people who are blind or low vision who use screen readers all the time, and if there's nothing in the title field, it just skips over and goes directly to the description. But there's a little bit of some people like using a title and a description, but I also like to be kind of aware of the user of the screen readers. You want to keep it as brief as possible, but still give the full meaning. So just be thinking about, you never want to repeat. You wouldn't want to have the title say the same thing as the description. So just use your best judgment and use the fewest amount of words to get a good meaning across. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it's all about the message you want to communicate. One question just came through in Q&A. When the image is a logo, should we just say something like Apple logo in the alt text instead of just Apple? And I think that's definitely a really good idea. You don't want to mislead people by making them think we have a red delicious apple when it's
Exactly.
actually the logo for a company.
If it's a logo, I usually say Apple logo.
Great. Well, so for our last few minutes, I'm going to really quickly show you all some of the ways you can apply what you just learned. So let me share my screen. I'm going to go to our presenter view. Oops. There we go. So what do we want you to do after this presentation? Ideally, you'll find a project or a theme to spotlight during the online event that you could plan this month, Citizen Science Month, to engage your communities from home. So you can find online projects and themes on citizensciencemonth.org or on SciStarter.org/NLM. Those are, as you saw earlier, those are those featured projects we showed you. And if you need help with your online event, maybe you don't have a Zoom account, you can join one of our weekly calls. We have these every Thursday, and they're basically just office hours where you can ask us questions, get help, anything else you need. And we do that because we know not everyone has a Zoom account, so we can partner with you and help do some tech support and webinar management. And also, we can stream it to SciStarter's Facebook page to help get the word out, and you can share it from your institutional page as well. And then our last call to action is add your online event to SciStarter. So you can go to citizensciencemonth.org to do this, or you can go to scistarter.org/add-event. Either way, we just want people to be able to discover your event, and this is a great way for you to get the word out. And when you make your event, if it's a webinar, if it's something else, we hope that you use these techniques that Kelly taught you today to make sure that your materials are accessible to everyone and are inclusive and part of the spirit of Citizen Science Month. So without further ado, thank you so much, Kelly, for teaching us today.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me. It was really wonderful. And I've been looking at a couple of the new questions that have come in the chat. What we'll do is collect all of these questions, and I'm going to be creating a handout. On that handout, I'll try to address the questions that have come in, including some of the earlier ones that came in, just so that anybody who accesses it later will have, they'll have all of that information available. And definitely reach out to us at any time if you have questions. I'd also like to give a shout out to the National Network of Libraries of Medicine, the other regions. I'm in the Pacific Southwest region, but if you are a library or a museum or would like to learn more about what we do, we are here to support you for your citizen science projects or your health-related programming. So we're really happy to connect with you. If you don't know how to get in touch with us, then send me an email. I'm going to put my email in the chat box really quick, and it'll also be in the slides that we send out to you. Let me just write that. Okay, there is my email address, and I am so happy we have some other people that are on the call right now who are from the different regions. So there we go. Thank you, Caroline. And thanks so much for attending, everybody. I am so happy that you all could join us, and be safe, be well, and take care of yourselves.
Something funny, you all, before I got this education today, I had made my slides, and Kelly very nicely told me, these aren't really following accessibility best practices. And I said, all the more reason for this webinar today.
But Caroline makes the best slides ever. They're so beautiful to look at. So the next time you see them, they're going to be accessible too.
Yes, it's all an evolving practice. And I think that's the biggest thing for all of us to remember. It may not be perfect the first time, but we'll keep on learning new things every day and new techniques, and we'll get there with accessibility. So it looks like more people are messaging us in the chat. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciate it. Let me stop sharing so I can see what people said. It's just all thank yous. Kelly, do you have anything else, or should we wrap up?
Yeah, I don't have anything else at this time. There's so much more I'd love to tell you all, but time is short, and so I think we'll wrap it up.
All right, bye everybody. Thank you. I'm gonna make sure we save this chat.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks, everybody.
All right, and we're gonna end our webinar. 3, 2, 1.